Hello and welcome to episode 305 of Sutton Impact Family Style. I'm Jason and I'm joined once again by Fred. How's it going, Fred?
Hey, it's going great. How are you, Jason?
I'm good. Obviously the big talk will be Super Bowl talks. We watched it yesterday.
A great game, wasn't it? I mean, it was certainly great that it was a tight game, tied with just a couple minutes, well, just a couple seconds left, really.
Yeah, you got 78 combined points. Both quarterbacks played really well. You had a couple of key plays. I guess we can... Where do you want to start today?
Well, I think, I guess the MVP thing would be a great place to start because it's one that kind of stands out as a big question mark. Like, how does Patrick Mahomes, not even throwing for 200 yards, get the MVP? Is the MVP really just name and, hey, this is going to be the guy going into it as long as he doesn't, totally screw things up?
I think this game, barring a miracle by some other player, was either a Mahomes or a Jalen Hurst. There's a world where Travis Kelce would get it maybe because he had a big storyline going in. But, people want Patrick Mahomes to be an elite company because he's a great player and people like being associated with greatness. So now he's one of only two quarterbacks to have two Super Bowl wins and two Super Bowl MVPs. It's like Montana, Brady, and Mahomes. And I think
That's a really interesting approach. That's a really interesting thought, though, that notion that, people want there to be that narrative. It kind of goes into maybe a bigger question that might not necessarily be for this show, but that notion of how much of a role kind of sports media plays in a lot of this stuff, especially, things like the MVP voting.
I think from, just a passion place and an ego place, you want to say you saw the best, you covered the best, you interviewed the best, And Mahomes has potential to be one of those pantheon elite level guys, and I think people want him to be there. And he also seems like a cool dude, with his Kermit the Frog voice and, everything else. But
yeah, he's definitely, I don't particularly root for the Chiefs, but they remind me in some ways of the Yankees teams that I rooted so hard against, being a New England guy. But it couldn't help but respect and really admire Jeter, Posada, Mariano Rivera. There was a Bernie Williams. There were so many guys on that team that even if you wanted to try to generate some level of disliking for them because they were on TV that night, it was impossible. It was just impossible. And Mahomes and Kelce, Andy Reid even, those three guys really stand out to me as, even though I'm not rooting for the Chiefs, they're guys that I root for. They're people that I root for because as human beings, as players, there's a lot of things to really like about them. So I think that notion of that kind of personal attachment to some of these guys can certainly lead to decisions such as Mahomes getting MVP.
and he could never win MVP, but watching the way that game was called, especially offensive, the play calling, Andy Reid seemed like a potential MVP.
Yeah, you still like that. Yeah, exactly. I could not agree more. That was really what stood out to me in the second half of that game. It seemed like Philly really, and the score was obviously closer because of the defensive touchdown, which always kind of levels things out. But it really seemed like the Eagles, that was their game to win. And then second half, it was completely different. And certainly offensively for the Chiefs in the second half. And that goes a lot to Andy Reid. And as much as there's always calls for Eric Bieniemy to get head coaching jobs, you hear over and over again how Andy Reid is a play caller. He's the one who kind of sets the thing. I really wonder what Bieniemy's role is in that, which is why I don't lump him into that same conversation, because it really does seem like it's an Andy Reid, driven process.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think he really stood out as if they could have, giving him the MVP would have been justified.
And my last Andy Reid thought is now with 2 straight weeks, or I guess 3 weeks now, because we had the Pro Bowl in between that I totally forgot about. But I feel like Andy Reid impersonators now look more like Andy Reid than Andy Reid does.
There's a couple really good ones that go to the games.
Like when I see them, like if they both walked into a bar, I would assume the impersonator was Andy Reid as opposed to Andy Reid, who's, I think he's lost some weight, or he's aged a little bit. So now, like, my mind of Andy Reid is the impersonators of Andy Reid, which is a funny thought to have, I think.
That is a good. I wonder, that would be a great TikTok video, just to see who people respond to if those two guys did show up into a bar.
Yeah. And I guess let's just continue Chiefs talk. And I'm just constantly fascinated by Travis Kelce continuing to be open. And to the point where, like, that's what I watch in the game as much as possible. Yeah. And there's times where, like, if you're the opposing team, I know Kadarius Toney made a couple of nice plays, Sky Moore made, Juju made some plays, but, like, the guy you have to stop is Kelce. And he doesn't seem exceptionally fast.
This is the same conversation we have when I'm watching the game. With my family and friends, it's a constant thing, right? Like, he's open every single time, and you're just like, how do you not have two guys covering this guy? And then they'll show the replay, and to your point, he'll make a juke to the right, and then he'll cut back into the left and be wide open in the middle. There's nobody there, and it's mind-boggling, and it's not to take anything away from him, because there's obviously something about him that is just. You can't identify why he is so good. I mean, is he just an extremely precise route runner? Does he know where the holes in every defense? I mean, certainly it seems pretty intelligent. Both him and his brother seem like they're intelligent football players beyond how gifted they are physically. But yeah, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm going into the game being like, hey, we got two guys on Kelce the entire game. How do we cover the rest of the guys?
And this will shock nobody. I'm not employed by the NFL or an NFL team or even a college team to coach defense. But I feel like I would want to employ like a box and one against the Chiefs. Like when you have a spy, when you play Lamar Odom or you play, a running quarterback that just sit in this hole. And if he starts to move, just mirror him. Don't let him go anywhere. We're not giving up long runs from Lamar. If I'm playing Travis Kelce, I'm taking either a big safety or a linebacker, and I'm being like, just run with him no matter where he goes, no matter what he does. Don't worry about anybody else on the field. Your assignment is just Travis Kelce. And he'll still get catches, but just don't let him out. I don't care if the guy's running the ball next to you. You're staying on Travis Kelce. You're in his back pocket. But,
Yeah, I mean, they do it in soccer. They call it man marking somebody. That seems like the perfect terminology for a way to try to reduce the impact that he has on the game.
At least try it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, at least try it, right? Because, like you said, like, it's just every game, he's the linchpin. He's the first guy. He scored the first touchdown. Like, he's just incredible. And I try to do something to stop him. I don't know.
Yeah, and having watched a lot of Chiefs games, if there's some games where they'll first couple quarters where they're sputtering, and what gets them going? It ends up being a touchdown drive where Kelce had 4 or 5 grabs. Ends up getting like a 5-yard touchdown because of either their little pitch pass there, or some other creative way to get him the ball. But usually that's what ends up happening for Chiefs for Chiefs win, is if they're sputtering, they just go to Kelce. And I mean, he's phenomenal. I actually a huge fan of him and his brother. I think they're just quality guys. And like I said, again, I'm excited that he won. I'm happy for him. As much as I wasn't looking forward to the Chiefs winning.
No, but as a New England fan, Tom Brady has 6 in New England, 7 overall. Mahomes now has 2, so you can still brag for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself a reasonable Patriots fan. There's at least a couple of us. So, very much thankful for those times. Not even bitter about the last couple of seasons, but, I don't know if that's the reason why I root against the Chiefs. There are some sports journalists, I'll use that term loosely,
yes,
who are very outspoken about their passion and love for the Chiefs that almost kind of push me to root against them. Because of that.
Very understandable.
That's pretty hollow. That's pretty hollow reasoning. I can admit that. But I just haven't figured it out.
And then I guess we have to call out, the two sort of big second half plays. We had the punt return by Kadarius Toney, which was incredible. Drove Giants fans crazy around the world because it was a first round pick of the Giants. I've had him on my fantasy team for 2 years. I've never played him once. He's always hurt, but he was absolutely electric on that punt return.
He was, and to his credit, he really, he had there were elements to that where he used his speed, and there were elements to that where he used his patience, right? Like the last 25 yards, it wasn't a full out sprint. He was just using his blocking in a smart way. You see runners with the football so many times, they could get another 15, 20, 30 yards if they just read their blockers right, and they end up going the wrong way and walking right into the tackle. And he, to his credit, he didn't do that. Didn't outrun the blocking and what brought down to the 5-yard line, 7-yard line.
Something like that, yeah. And then I guess since we've waited for I sort of have a beef with calling it a controversial call on the Juju Smith. I mean, Bradbury after the game said he held. If you watch the replay, he had a handful of jersey. They didn't call pass interference. It was a 5-yard, and if it's a foul, it's a foul. Like, I don't believe in this. I mean, the swallow the whistle because it's an important part of the game that you get to cheat. Like, that's the logic I hear people yelling about today. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, and the reason why I was, frustrated about that call was because there was a much less, and I get it, there's different crews that referee each game, and each guy's going to see something different. But in a critical play last week, or 2 weeks ago, pardon me, when Cincinnati was playing the Bengals, there was a really tic-tac foul called against Cincinnati. And same kind of thing where a guy had a hand on him, but he didn't grab a jersey or anything like that. Didn't disrupt the way the guy was going. And I do think that as impossible as the situation is, because it's, we're all watching it when they play it back and slow it down, and you got this move or that move, and it's all happening in real time. But when you watch that play in real time, yeah, there's a grab here and a little bit of a hand around the waist there, but he never turned him, never pulled him around. Like, I didn't think it was worthy of a call, but maybe just my coaching background, I still always maintain that if the game comes down to one call, then you lost it. Don't let the game come down to the referees. That's what it boils down to.
Exactly. And I just feel like I know the NFL secretly loves when people complain about the NFL or the refs, because if they're talking about the refs, they're talking about the NFL, they're talking about football. They still love it. It's passion. But I'm a big believer just call it. Like, if you want to clean the game up, make the game look better, just call everything. Make the players adjust. Because Bradbury admitted he grabbed his jersey, and it was a 5-yard penalty. And if it's a 5-yard penalty in the first quarter, it's a 5-yard penalty in the fourth quarter. Like, I hate superstar calls in the NBA, where a guy is standing there and LeBron blows by him and dunks, and they call an and one.
Unless he's playing Boston, which I'm thankful for.
I just don't want to see. I just call it down the line and keep it straight. I think that's the way to go.
That honestly, I mean, you're exactly right, because then there's not those questions about is it or isn't it? Why is it here and why is it not there? Like, to be as consistent as possible, because you can't have one crew officiate all the games. So how do you develop a level of consistency with something that's subjective?
And if the Chiefs had again missed that field goal after that, let's say, and the Eagles got the ball down, or maybe the Chiefs kicked the field goal, Eagles down, got a touchdown. If I'm a Chiefs fan today, I'm yelling about the call where Juju's shirt was clearly held.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're on the losing side, it's easy to pick a call that you lost on. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about how, for anybody in an authority position, decisions that you make, there's always going to be people that are going to be angry about it.
Yeah.
And there's no more true, that idiom is not any more true than in a sports arena. Because just by the nature of it, you have two fan bases, right? So one team benefits and the other team doesn't. So, yeah, it's an impossible situation to make perfect. But to your point, at least taking steps to try to make it as consistent as it can be
That's
would
pretty.
be something I think a lot of sports fans would enjoy. Even though the first season of that, football wise, certainly the first season of that would be horrible because it'd be 35 a game. But
Yeah.
but any knowledgeable fan would realize like, okay, this is actually for the better long term. What about the possibility of making everything reviewable?
Well, I've raved about it for years now on this podcast, but what do you call it? Sky Judge, whatever you want to call it. Like, I want a microphone with a guy in the booth, and everyone in the field has an earpiece. And if it's obviously a catch or obviously a drop, he tells the officials make the correction right there, and we move on. Like, we're all judging the game based on technology. We have incredible cameras, incredible camera angles. There should be a guy in a room with TVs that's, the TV official, the Sky Judge, whatever you want to call him, and he's helping keeping the game moving and correct, And again, not going back and being like, there was a hold on that call.
People who are always arguing the side of like, well, there's a human element involved.
Yeah.
That wonderful argument.
It's,
At the end of the day, we all just want it to be right.
It's true. Well, I guess we harped on the bad part. Let's harp on the good part of the Eagles. Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't know it, I guess. I mean, it really was a sneaky, really good individual game for him. Threw for over 300 yards, rushing touchdown. And the big question going into the game was how was he going to be as a passer? And certainly he seemed to answer that. I thought he had really good zip on the ball, pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Really looked good.
His only mistake was that fumble that the Chiefs returned for a touchdown on the strip sack.
And I will say again, coaching back then, at least he was trying to get the ball into the outside hand.
He was.
So he's trying to do the right thing.
And he was for the Eagles' vaunted offensive line and the Eagles' vaunted rushing attack, he was the only rushing attack. The three-headed monster they have of Gainwell and Boston Scott and Miles Sanders did nothing collectively.
Exactly right. They didn't, and it's pretty shocking too. I mean, credit to the Chiefs, front seven, because one of the big things we heard about was just how good the offensive line was for the Eagles, and them being able to dominate the game on the ground, and the Chiefs made the adjustments. Spagnuolo and made some good calls. I did notice in the second half they started putting a lot of pressure on Hurts.
They did.
And always having somebody over on the other side of the line. But they did a good job shutting down that ground game. And yeah, it really left Hurts as the only effective runner for them for most of the game.
And I think the other thing, and I guess I said I was going to stop talking negative about the Eagles, but here we go again. They set the league record with sacks. Most popular bets all year long, all Super Bowl week long, where Hassan Reddick gets a sack, Jahan Hargrave gets a sack, or the Eagles get 4.5 sacks. The Eagles had 0 sacks, and honestly, barely pressured Mahomes for the most part. I would say, not consistently anyway, right?
No, I don't remember any. There was, obviously there was a play here or there.
Yeah.
Obviously they were on him enough to get, I think it was behind the line of scrimmage when they got him and they tweaked his ankle. But, it wasn't, like your standard kind of sack.
Well, he was technically running. He was considered a runner at that point, so they didn't call it. They got 0 technical sacks in that game for the team that set the league record for most sacks in each season. So.
Yeah, and is that a championship pedigree? Is that like a coaching piece? Is that, I think that there's a lot that goes into that probably because, the guys on the Chiefs line, there's a lot of good players there, but like we're talking about, the Eagles had a season-long level of success with pressuring the quarterback, and they didn't get anywhere. And you take away his mobility to some extent, obviously, right? He had that Mahomes had that 25-yard scramble towards the end of the game where he looked like he was okay.
He did, yeah. That was a great run, yeah.
Yeah, but for the most part, he was limited to move around the way he normally does, and still, to your point, no sacks. It's really impressive if you're a Chiefs fan.
Yeah. Um, that's pretty much my Super Bowl thoughts. I mean, congratulations, Chiefs. If you had Eagles, I guess congratulations on Jalen Hurts, but you're going to have to pay him a lot of money now. So,
Yeah, yeah, a lot of questions that still come out, right? Like, what are they going to do with Hurts in terms of the contract? And I've heard it floated around: is Andy Reid going to retire?
apparently, he said no. He said his response was pretty funny. He's like, "You guys have asked me 70 times this past week and a half." He's like, "So I finally threw out a maybe just to shut you up. But I'm definitely coming back next year." Which I get, because every outlet feels like they have to. I mean, they have to ask the exact same questions over and over again for whatever reason.
Yeah, I get the impression that being a beat writer is not an easy job. So I can't necessarily blame him on that. And then you add the Super Bowl in, where there's usually hundreds and hundreds of extra media outlets and reporters there to cover anything and everything. So that's one of those things that I give any professional athlete a lot of credit for, is having to deal with all that stuff, especially like right after, if you're an Eagles player and you're still have a media obligation, you're still getting pulled and having to answer a ton of questions about the game. That stuff is just so hard, because football, especially, is such an emotional game. I don't envy players in those situations. So, whether it be winning team and you're being asked the same question for the 500th time, or whether you're on the losing team, you have to answer those questions because of the NFL media obligations. That's a tough spot for all those guys to be in.
Yeah, it's true. Well, now in the most fruitless of all fruitless questions, way too early. Super Bowl predictions next year. Who you got?
I'm gonna go. I think that it's gonna be a team out of the West again, but I'm going. I think I'm bought into the Kellen Moore piece, and I see San Diego, or what used to be San Diego, Los Angeles. I see the Chargers surprising people and coming out of the AFC.
Okay.
Which, I mean, AFC is really just kind of throwing it up in the air. Anyways, there's 11 good teams.
Yeah, it's stacked.
And with so much still to get figured out. So I'm going to go Chargers, and I'm going to go San Francisco, because they're going to actually have, I don't know who it's going to be yet, but they're going to have a quarterback that's going to be healthy for at least 16 games out of the year, and they're going to be done.
Well, I hate to agree with the San Francisco part because it's just bad radio, but San Francisco is my pick in the NFC because they seem like the most logical team, right?
Yeah, a whole year with Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that defense is crazy.
And while we love the Eagles, it does seem like they have a lot of free agents right now to deal with. And that's not going to be the same team this year, so we'll see what happens with them. And the AFC, like you said, I mean, both of our teams have great coaches and are solid teams, and they're not even top 10.
Yeah.
And you still have to go through those teams to get there. It's boring, but I think I'm going to pick San Francisco and the Bengals, the two teams, the runners-up this year. I mean, my wild card pick is the Jets.
Oh, jeez. Oh, my God, you're killing me. But the problem is that I can't really argue that point. If they get a quarterback, they're actually going to be a pretty scary team. And if they do get a quarterback, then the Patriots' chances of making the playoffs are shot.
Well, maybe after 4 days in the dark, Aaron Rodgers will come out, see a jet in the sky, and decide, I need to be a Jet, and that'll be it.
Yep.
Following Brett Favre's footsteps, go from the Packers to the Jets.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Right there, that tells me that that's not going to happen.
I know, that's the only thing hanging in the way. It was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think, some of the stuff that will be very interesting, you had mentioned Philadelphia with all that they're going to have to deal with free agency-wise, and some of the things changing on the team. I think the Bills are going to be in a really tough spot. I think their window's closed.
Yeah, I think it might be for now.
They have way too many free agents, especially on defense. And and that's not even anything to do with, again, being a Patriots fan. I have a lot of respect for the Bills and what they've done. Built a really solid franchise. I love their coach, but I just think that, again, with the competition level in the AFC, that they're in trouble.
Yeah, they are. Well, I guess until we get to the draft, we'll probably slow the NFL talk for a little while. And we had a giant NBA trade deadline. I guess the biggest name, Kevin Durant, is now a Sun.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the thing that really stood out to me, there were a couple things that I found really interesting about the trade deadline this year in the NBA. How the record number of second round picks that were traded.
Oh yeah.
Tossed around, and I still don't know how that's going to work out. I mean, our team's just of the point where, hey, listen, we can name 3 second round draft picks that have done anything over the last 20 years, and so we'll just throw them around and see if people will grab them. Or is there some other piece that I'm missing to that? But I'm really intrigued by some of like the smaller trade, quote unquote smaller trades, and the impact that they're going to have going forward.
Yeah, I think the second round picks, I think all the GMs just got together and they basically turned second round picks into Bitcoin. And they just got everybody really excited about it, Ultimately, not much value there, but as long as they all prop them up to be really good, really exciting, that people are like, we got 5 second round picks for so and so. It's like, okay, cool.
Great.
Yeah, like you, I really like Thomas Bryant to Denver. I think he played really well for the Lakers. I was surprised they got rid of him. I know he was he didn't like his, on and off again minutes, but he's a really solid backup and an extra nice big to have, to help with Jokic.
I think it was part of that same trade. It would be really interesting to see Bones Highland going to
the Clippers.
The Clippers. I think that's again one of those kind of under the radar ones that could actually end up being huge. Bones has been one of those guys that has had some amazing games. Especially when he was spelling Murray when he was out. But it's just really inconsistent. I wonder if having a consistent number of minutes in the role is going to be will make him one of those second round picks that people talk about now. I'm not sure.
It could be. I know Denver was pretty eager to get rid of him, so I guess he was not a very good locker room guy or a very good chemistry guy. And
yeah, I had heard the same thing, and that's always a big deal, especially in the NBA.
Well, especially if you have championship aspirations like Denver does. Like, you can't afford to have a guy that, is worried about getting his own whenever he gets in the game. Doesn't want to play within the system. And if you can't play well with Jokic, I don't know what to tell you.
That's good. I think the other thing that the other player that the Clippers had in Plumlee, I think that actually is another, like you're talking about with Bryant being a good depth piece.
Yeah.
I think Plumlee really, helps them, and for them and for several other teams, even the Suns included in this, it's really going to boil down to how healthy can they be. Clippers for the longest time just don't know what you're going to get out of George.
And Kawhi, yeah.
And Kawhi, right? And it's the same thing with the Suns. Like, I mean, think about it. You put that team on paper now, and it's a sick team.
The top 5 for sure. Yeah, you're starting 5.
Yeah, but health questions with Durant, health questions with Paul, health questions now with Booker. Like, they could either be a finals, a breeze to the finals, or they could, lose in the first round because half their guys are hurt.
I mean, Kevin Durant hasn't suited up for the Suns yet, and it's weird because they became the favorites in the West according to the booking people, the bets, which is, And I have to say, for as bad as Brooklyn has looked, and I know they're still stuck with Ben Simmons, but now that they have no Kyrie, no Harden, and no Durant, who only played together for 13 games, they got a lot of picks and a lot of nice players, And I know they have 7 wings right now, including Mikal Bridges, but considering the hole they were in, I think they did a nice job of digging out of it.
I would agree with that because I mean that team was just a dumpster fire, and at least now, hopefully now they have guys who want to be there. Although it will be interesting to see with Dinwiddie if he's like happy or frustrated about being back. But yeah, I mean that team has, and I really like Claxton.
Yeah, and Cam Thomas.
I mean, they have some good young guys.
Yeah. And I mean, you had a situation with Harden, Kyrie, and Durant, three of the most talented yet most frustrating players probably in the history of the NBA, all together in one team. And, I would even assume the collective miserableness in the building from their attitudes, just because they all seem miserable all the time. They never seem happy. Well, Harden seems happy when he's not playing basketball and he's out partying with Lil Baby. But
right.
In general, they just seem like they're, they all need therapy and some hugs. I don't know. But
you could honestly do a pretty monster all therapy team, right? Like we add AD into that. and and you got like some Hall of Fame caliber guys on that team.
Well, we saw the Lakers move off of Russ, and I guess this is a good time to mention that, like, when LeBron broke the scoring record, AD didn't get off the bench. Mm-hmm. He didn't clap. He didn't get up to be high five. I saw somebody else say this. I've always thought this, but now an actual NBA player said, I don't know if it was Jay Williams or somebody, but that for as great a leader as LeBron is on the court, he's a terrible leader off the court. And he gets credit for being a great leader off the court, but he's just not. He's very passive aggressive. He alienates guys, and then when you play with him, you go back to his early days in Cleveland and even in Miami and everywhere he's been. When the team does well, it's LeBron James doing it. When the team does poorly, it's not LeBron James's fault. And some of that's his media power. I mean, and again, I do admire him. I mean, I remember him on the cover of Sports Illustrated in high school, and he's maintained a fairly level head, all things considered. But he got booed at the Super Bowl last night pretending to put a crown on. But people don't seem to be that happy being on his team.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting too, right? When we think about some of the people who are most prominent, teammates of his, now Anthony Davis, and before that Kyrie. When you got two guys who are a little bit quirky anyways.
Yeah.
But it makes complete sense that if they're not being led in a way that they're being felt to be part of the solution, then maybe that's that's a really interesting piece. I didn't hear that interview, so that's very interesting information.
Well, it's interesting from the standpoint that, like, I follow him on social media, obviously doing the sports podcast and loving the NBA, but like, he says so much passive aggressive stuff that is just sort of soft and weak, just as a general thing in any person. It doesn't matter if you're an athlete or a gardener. Just the passive aggressive stuff is pretty sad, but like, he selectively ends up throwing all of his other teammates under the bus through passive aggressive stuff and saying how the team's not good enough and we need to go get somebody and that we're being let down by the organization. It's just that constant, every whiny, thing from him. I think it just grades on players.
Yeah, it is, because I was absolutely shocked to see AD's reaction or the way he carried himself, because I mean, what we've seen through the interviews and the media lens, it seems like LeBron's like always got AD's back, but again, behind the scenes, we don't know what that feels like or what it seems like.
I mean,
so I was really shocked by it.
If I was 38-year-old LeBron, and I can see the end of my career, just, I know he's like Brady, he's another freakish athlete that you haven't really seen him really slow down yet. If I'm looking at AD, who's a very frustrating player, who when he's on is one of the best players in the world, but he's often injured, and when he's not on the court, he falls weird and he's expected to be injured. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if LeBron has been pushing for them to at least explore AD trades, and maybe that's gotten back to AD.
Yeah, because you would think that would get back to him, right?
Yeah. And again, I wouldn't blame LeBron, because it's like my second star that you need to have in the NBA isn't reliable, and it doesn't seem like AD's like in bad conditioning. It just seems like he just has that, worst luck on the planet.
Yeah.
And now they brought in,
because I think he had bulked up for this year, right?
yeah,
He's still running into some stuff, but at least you can't fault him for trying something different.
no,
Trying to be able to get through a season. So, um, and it's a killer too because I mean he's an immensely talented guy. He has been since he was in Kentucky, and I was really hoping that things were actually going to work out for him.
yeah, he had a
In
couple,
New Orleans, but that wasn't the case.
yeah. And now the Lakers did give up one of those vaunted picks. They gave up the 27 pick, top 4 protected. And I think they do have a better team, but I think they're still a playing team at best. And I don't know how that, what you do.
Yeah. Again, I think with some of the other teams with the upgrades they made, I don't know that LA changed their position really at all. And so I agree with you from that standpoint.
I mean, you brought in D'Angelo Russell, Yui Hachimura. Like, they're better NBA players than the guys you sent out, but I don't think you significantly made yourself better. So.
Yeah, I mean, it really puts the coach there, Birmingham, in a tough spot to try to piece this together as they're coming down the stretch. The other thing that really stood out to me about the trade deadline was like a couple guys, really you could almost make an argument that they didn't get done right at all. Like, Westbrook getting sent to Utah where he's got the history with the fans there, and I get that they're going to buy out his contract if they haven't already. But that's just cold. And John Wall getting sent back to the Rockets. And I guess he had an interview just a couple weeks ago where he was asked about the Rockets and he was just blowing them up.
Yeah.
So some of those things were really interesting with just how cold-hearted everything had gotten.
Yeah, and there's talk that Russell Westbrook has interest from the Clippers and the Bulls, apparently.
Really?
Russell Westbrook's a weird, because I've always been a Westbrook fan, because he does play as hard as anybody, 24/7. And he has his flaws, obviously. But I feel like he kind of he's been sort of scapegoated these last 2 years in Los Angeles. Like, he's played fairly well. And if AD had stayed healthy and been the number 2 guy like he's supposed to be, and at this point, I think LeBron even envisioned him being like the guy, and LeBron would be the guy when he needed to be, but AD would be the night-to-night best player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And he just hasn't been. And, everyone's like, Westbrook. And it's like, well, AD can't stay healthy. Like, AD can't stay consistent playing on the field, and it's just, between that and, LeBron's tinkering as a GM, like getting rid of guys like Alex Caruso, who everybody wanted from the Bulls, and Kuzma and all these guys that everybody wants now. Like, LeBron had them.
Yeah, and I mean he's got that. LeBron has built up that history, trend of each team that he's been at for a while. The post LeBron era, certainly recent, right after he leaves, is not ever very good because he's basically pushed the team to really, gut everything. He did that both times with Cleveland. It looks like he's doing that with LA. I can say, you could say that he didn't do that in Miami, and that's probably because Pat Riley just was a strong enough personality not to give in to all that sort of stuff. Which is probably why LeBron's not there anymore. But it is interesting how those teams that don't have a GM that's strong enough to say, like, no, LeBron, we're not going to do that, typically end up paying a pretty big price afterwards.
It's true. Well, I guess we've been going for a while now.
They don't have a draft pick for the next 7 years?
Till 2029. I think
crazy.
It is. Or maybe they have every other pick. So maybe they have the even picks, or I don't know. They have a lot of swaps and picks. They're not doing a lot of picking in the next few drafts.
Yeah, I think I've heard some people say, like, hey, this is a great player. It doesn't necessarily make a great GM. And, it's pretty rare that there's, who's a great player that made a transition, even just from a full-time basis, into being a great GM.
I think Larry Bird might be the closest, right?
Who's that?
I guess Jerry West and Larry Bird.
Oh,
But Jerry West,
yeah.
number one for sure. I mean, Larry Bird had some nice years in Indiana.
Yeah. Yeah, that would certainly be fair. Um, Kerr is a great coach, now a GM, but he wasn't like necessarily a great player. Um, which makes a lot more sense to me. I don't know what your experiences are, but like I just feel like guys who've had to work harder for things understand like all the details that go into it. That they make the best coaches or even talent assessors. Whereas guys who are really gifted, naturally gifted, just don't see it as easily.
And I think they just expect everybody to be on their level and just to get things as fast as they get it, and it just isn't going to happen. So,
Yeah, interesting stuff. Celtics wise, they just made one little move, which added a shooter, which is a good thing. Bucks, they added Crowder. I think that was the only addition that they had, which is good for them. Crowder's a tough
yeah.
guy that you can rely on.
Well, the Bucks are in that same Clippers thing right now with like Ken Middleton and these guys stay on the floor when the playoff time comes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see.
And I think Golden State getting
Gary Payton.
Gary Payton knows. I mean, does he have any nickname along what his dad had with the glove?
I don't think so. I think he's just
Is he the glove junior?
junior. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but getting Gary Payton back, clearly that's something that they very much missed. The defense has been really rough. So him coming back and being able to hopefully solidify things for them again makes the West pretty competitive once again. East is competitive at the top, but West is really competitive 1 through 10. So it will be interesting.
Yeah. Well, I guess as we wrap up, do you have any food or entertainment moments you want to talk about, or?
Entertainment-wise, we caught, this might be old.
Yeah.
Well, recently we caught Men Named Otto.
Okay.
Men Named Otto? I forget. The new Tom Hanks movie. I had told my wife I wasn't going to go see it originally because I thought it was about this guy whose wife had died, and I just, that's not a movie I want to go see.
Sure.
Because I don't want to even ever think about that. And she had assured me that it wasn't, but no, that was a big part of it. And so that was a little bit tough. But acting-wise, I will tell you that there's a woman plays the character Marisol in the movie. And reading up on her, she had very little movie acting experience. Most of her career had been stage acting.
Right.
She was unbelievable. Unbelievable. So impressed with her. Movie overall was well written. Also interesting was the fact that there are flashback scenes that show Tom Hanks' character, Otto, when he was younger. And it's actually played by his son, which is kind of interesting. But definitely a movie I would recommend.
Okay.
If you are, in a good place. If you're not in a good place emotionally, it's not one to go see. But if you feel good and you just want to go see something dramatic, well acted, very well acted, and well written, then Tom Hanks in the movie is definitely worth watching.
Okay.
And then I haven't been on for a little while. We had actually one of the ones that we caught recently that I was really impressed with was The Fablemans. Did you catch that?
I did not. No, not yet.
Definitely really cool. There's some, it obviously is a loose interpretation of Spielberg kind of like talking about his own life and move into the film industry. Some really cool scenes, really well done. Again, the actor who played the young Mr. Fableman, not Steven Spielberg. Yes, Steven Spielberg character. He did a really good job as well. But that's another one that I would highly recommend, and a couple really interesting scenes that are just classic ones. There's a scene where the main character gets his first real charge with providing an actor direction and how he gets him to that place so he can provide a really good performance. The scene itself is really well done, very powerful. All in all, a very good representation of filmmaking and storytelling.
Okay. I don't think I had any specific entertainment. I had a weird food one.
Weird food, that's a bad combo right off the start, just as an intro.
Well, I went to a king cake tasting party. And for those not familiar, in New Orleans during Mardi Gras, everybody eats king cake. And a traditional king cake is basically a round cinnamon roll, like in a big loop. So in a king cake tasting party, everybody brings their favorite king cake from around the city, and everybody takes a bite. And there were 24 king cakes, so it's an insane amount of sugar, as there was only one savory king cake.
And did you make the king cake or you buy it?
You buy it from your favorite shop or store. A couple people did make their own homemade king cakes.
Okay.
It does open like an interesting question though, because like, so it's king cake party. Everybody brings a different king cake, and you're supposed to pick your favorite one based on texture and flavor, and it's like very, like a cooking show. But they all have different fillings, and then some of them go so far away from what a king cake is, you wonder if it even counts as a king cake. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, first of all, I actually kind of am falling in love with the word king cake. It just seems to roll right off the tongue.
It does.
But what is supposed to be? What's like a traditional king cake contain for like the middle part?
Okay, a traditional king cake is basically like a sweet brioche, a cinnamon sugar sort of swirl. Then it has icing, and then it has the purple, green, and gold sugar or more icing on top.
Okay.
So it becomes like sort of a mild. The base is sort of a mild cinnamon bun is the main one. But like for instance, there was one there that called itself a king cake, but it was a filling of peanut butter and cream cheese with chocolate topping and peanut butter chips. So it was like
Did it have some of the traditional colors on the top under the top? Or like
It didn't. No, it didn't even have the traditional colors. It was. I would say this: anytime you go to a king cake tasting and you're eating bites of 24 king cakes, 23 of which are not savory and are just sweet, you feel like a diabetic coma probably by bite 7 or 8, and then they all sort of start tasting just like sugar. But the peanut butter one sort of stood out because it was so different from everything else. But then I was like, is this even a king cake anymore? I feel the same with like buffalo chicken pizza. Like if it's buffalo sauce, blue cheese, and I don't know, ranch like on a crust, I'm like, is that even like if you told me I was coming over for pizza and you served me that, I'd be pretty upset.
Yes.
So I'm like, I guess technically you made something in the shape of a pizza, but this is none of the elements of pizza. And I just don't know when it becomes a pizza, if you will, or when it becomes a king cake, or it's no longer a king cake, for judging purposes.
Yeah, I don't want to get off topic, but I do have to make sure I ask you about the whole pineapple on pizza thing, just to see where you stand. It's a general question to ask people when the topic comes up. But in terms of the king cake thing, I've seen them before. So going to your point, like if somebody's presenting you one that doesn't have the known elements, like the kind of the Mardi Gras colors on the top and that kind of stuff, then it's definitely not a king cake.
No, it was a delicious peanut butter dessert, but I'm like, I don't know if you can win some sort of contest for best king cake when you've completely avoided all the actual rules of king cake eatingness.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the prerequisites is that it's going to look like a king cake. Even if you opened it up and it was drastically different inside, there's nothing like to your point. If somebody came and provided you that cake and said like, "Hey, guess what this is?" You're not guessing king cake.
No, I'd be like, it's some sort of super peanut butter cup or something delicious. I mean, like I said, it was delicious. I loved it, but I was like, I don't know what this is anymore. I can't give you I don't want to give you points because I don't even know what this is. Like, and again, king cakes have obviously evolved. So it's like you've got your base king cake, then you have one that's got cinnamon and cream cheese. And then sometimes they get rid of the cinnamon and they throw in strawberry. But like I said, eventually it becomes a thing where it's like there's so many different varieties. I'm like, I don't even, if I tell you we're having king cake, you're gonna be like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, at least if they like had like, you know, Prince cake and Duke cake, if they're going to continue to kind of evolve, they should at least, you know,
Yeah.
get a name that goes.
Like clearly related. And again, I'm all for experimentation and do what you want to do, but it's like if the assignment is pick the best king cake, you got to at least be close to a king cake.
It seems, you know, and much like many things in this world, it seems pretty clear cut, but people are always just not following the rules.
Yeah, and if you invent something totally new and awesome, cool, just find a new name for it.
Yeah. Back to my point, pineapple on pizza, okay or not okay?
It's not for me. I'm strictly a Kevin McAllister from Home Alone kind of guy. A lovely cheese pizza just for me is pretty much my ideal.
Yeah, nothing on your burgers, like you just pretty much just like.
I like, see, when people say plain or boring, I like to say that I like the purest essence
there you go.
of what it is. And to be fair, when they judge...
Okay, that's a good way to look at it.
Yes, and when they judge the World Pizza Competition, it is strictly a margarita or a cheese slice. You know, that's the one they judge.
There is a place that opened up near us, a new brewery, Treehouse Brewery is the name of it. I think they have 3 breweries just here in Massachusetts. But it's this huge building, and the setup is incredible. But apparently the owner is infatuated with pizza and was hell-bent on being able to make the best pizza, you know, this side of Chicago. And I think they might have accomplished it.
Oh.
It's a nice thin crust. And they only have like 4 different kinds, right? Like, so to your point, like not crazy varieties, but it is so perfectly made. The cheese that they put on there is the exact right cheese for the temperature they cook it at. Crust is like just to die for. But since I brought us the pizza, like I just gotta throw that in.
Well, we can never go away from pizza. Pizza's the best food in the world. But I would also say, like, I feel like if you don't make a good slice of cheese pizza, I don't want to eat the rest of your pizza.
Yes.
Now, I like pepperoni. I like some sausage from time to time. And, like, I'm not opposed. You know, my family all loves mushrooms. And, you know, Maria likes jalapenos and stuff. And it's great. Fine. Whatever you want to do. But, like, if the basic thing you do sucks, covering it up with more toppings doesn't make it good to me.
A good paint job on a rusty old Chevy, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's the Domino's, Papa John's, Pizza Hut formula of we'll put so much crap on here and we'll give you dipping sauces. And it's like, because we can't make pizza. But we can make we can put a whole show about, you know, we'll throw some garlic butter and ranch in the box and we'll stuff the crust with cheese and hot dogs and do everything we can because we can't do pizza, but we can do this.
I've fallen for the garlic butter thing though. Like, I mean, we don't have a Papa John's around here, but we went on vacation recently and I was like, okay, well, let's just check it out. And yes, the pizza wasn't great, but man, that garlic butter dipping sauce was really good.
I mean, it's butter and garlic. It's delicious.
I mean, sometimes it can be just the most basic stuff that you just love.
Yeah.
That's all. So.
Well, I think that's probably a pretty long show for today. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back next week with the same 2 of us, as my dad is still in India. Hopefully learning to enjoy Indian food, which we know he doesn't like, but he's there for 2 weeks, so what's he going to do? So until next week, thank you.